Recording in progress.
Okay, we've got the owl on the phone.
They should be on there and trying to. Should be in the waiting room.
Yep. Ben? Oh, wait, what are you trying to do?
Take a cup of coffee.
Oh, I don't know the machine on the right.
Okay, is it on?
It is on,
Okay.
and I heard it, heat up.
Well, did you want to use what?
No.
No, okay, so.
Hello? I put it in before I turned it on. I did it
It's
backwards.
gotta heat up.
Gotcha, thanks.
I don't even try to do that one because I couldn't tell you how to do it.
Oh, that's not the one you use?
That's an espresso, if you want espresso,
It's fancy.
that's a fancy one. And I'm not fancy.
Oh, that's fun. This is just a curious.
I don't drink coffee, so I guess I'm just like, I don't know how to make it.
You're an outlier.
I hope no one, I hope, well, yeah, I guess I'm hyper on my own, so.
Thanks.
Hey. Again,
Hello.
you really want to ask that?
Essential question.
I try not to
Not
bother.
much different from
Last I saw him,
anytime you see me.
he was, being stopped by the troopers. Did he tell you about that?
Mhm. Oh, on the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw the video. Yeah.
We were actually trying to
You want
ask
to put us
for
on
the.
mute there, just in case someone comes in?
Hey, how you doing?
Right, yeah.
Long time.
Hey, Olivia, I just want to do a quick sound check with you for other people.
You are getting into.
I was definitely getting like a duo feedback situation just a second ago, but try again.
Are you still getting feedback?
So, Bryce.
No.
Okay. I moved the mic because I think we'll have some public testimony today, so if you notice feedback, send me a text. Or
Okay,
a
sounds good.
chat here.
Have they gone through all these documents?
No,
Like
none of
the
it.
City council.
All right, I'm gonna go back on mute until we,
And they haven't been through any official legal review.
Oh, good.
Just
Good afternoon, everybody. We're gonna go ahead and get started. We have four. First, I'd like to have the members introduce themselves. And, let's go ahead and start with Mayor Hopkins.
Borough Mayor, right, Harry Hopkins. Whatever.
Did you say Bryce?
I almost did, I think. Yeah. You can come back.
Catherine Keith, Deputy Commissioner and Acting Northern Region Director with DOT.
Go ahead.
And Sean Lynch, Chief Counsel for DOT.
Corey Bruliano, Fast Planning Staff.
Jared Clear, City of Fairbanks.
And Jackson Fox Fastman.
Let's go online with the board members.
Chase Knowles, DEC Air Quality.
We'll turn the volume up.
Look at your volume up. Thank you, Jason.
Scott Kress,
Scott?
Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly.
Okay. Are you in transit, Scott?
I'm just boarding a plane. I should be able to attend though.
Corey, we're getting the audio out of the box up there, not the owl. So maybe
So that, can we do an audio test, Scott or Jason Olds?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Hopefully you can hear me.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Let's go around the room here, introductions, and we'll go online, starting with Gary. Gary? You introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. Gary Wood. Morning. Steve, how are you?
Jenny Campbell.
Mary Farrell.
Jack Barnwell, designer.
Gilligan, Fairbanks, North Borough. Brad Nelson, DOT.
Owen Spillman, Fairbanks North Star Borough.
And then online, please.
Barbara Schumann. Patrice Lee.
Jeff Kupko with Michael Baker.
Ben White with DOT.
Randy Bailey, DOT.
Olivia Lunsford, Fast Planning.
John Peralt, DOT.
Read out the names that, are not on there, just for the record.
Would you like that? Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
The additional names, I see John Linnelli, or Linnell, Kim Solian, Marie Heidelman, Megan Flory. And that looks like it. We've got a couple of phone numbers unidentified. As well as Griffin Sakau. Saki.
All right, thank you. For those in attendance or online hoping to address an item later on, we only have two action items, and that's item A on the agenda and under new business 9A as well. If you are here to speak to anything other than that, the time to do it would be under number 7, which would be public comments on any item on the agenda that's not up for public hearing. If we have public hearing, we'll do it at the time that item comes up on the agenda. Need a motion to approve the December 18th, 2024 agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
On Mayor Hopkins.
Oh, second.
Yes, I'd like that. So. Anyone wishing to change the agenda or add something to it? Seeing no one, would you go ahead and call the roll, please?
yes, Mr. Cleaver,
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins,
Yes.
Ms. Keith,
Yes.
Mr. Krass,
Yes.
and Mr. Olds.
Yes.
Hey, Corey, can you put the video of this? We can see who talks.
Yep.
Thank you.
You guys moved me.
That side got full, we need to balance it out.
I don't like change. You got me myself over here.
You're with Scott Grass and Larry Church and Digital.
Well,
Have the record show that Peter Cruz is with us.
yes, I am.
Just grabbing a few more.
Fine, but I think I'm good. I can see
You're good? Okay, that brings us to number 4, approval of November 20th, 2024 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
By Mayor Hopkins, second.
Second.
Second by Mayor Cruz. Any discussion? Seeing none, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mayor Cruz.
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Ms. Keith. Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
Mr. Krass.
Yes.
And Mr. Olds.
Yes.
Okay, next up is the staff report. Let me go with it.
Thank you, Jerry. Beginning on page 8 is our staff report of activities that we carried out over the past months, the last time that we met. Just a few items to highlight here on the staff report. We did have our quarterly MPO coordination meeting down in Palmer last week on December 11th. This is an all-day meeting where all 3 MPOs in the state convene along with DOT staff and Commissioner's Office staff and our federal partners to discuss a variety of issues and provide each other updates on the work that we're all doing together. At that meeting, we did discuss edits to the operating agreements, the boundary approvals, the new Transportation Alternatives Program guidebook, the corrective action items for the STIP and STIP Amendment number 2, which should be coming out soon. And then the day after that meeting, we met in Anchorage at the DOT Central Region Building to discuss, all 3 MPOs to discuss with DOT staff some new changes to the format and structure of our Transportation Improvement Program or our TIP documents so that we can try to get those all synced up with each other and add additional information requested by DOT in our funding plans. Beyond those meetings, while I was in Anchorage, Corey was here in Fairbanks and he held the latest steering committee meeting for our Complete Streets policy update. And so that group is continuing to work on that. We hope to bring that forward to the technical committee and policy board in the new year to show you some of the proposed revisions to our policy, which I believe was adopted in 2015 or 2016. So it's a few years old. But anyways, there's some exciting changes there that the board will consider adoption in the future. Under correspondence and communication, we do have one new letter from the, it's a joint letter from the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration on the corrective action items in the STIP. They did overturn their previous decision on the flood control bridges out in the North Pole area to allow those to move forward in the STIP and not have to be included within our local funding plan. But also in that letter, it is stated that all other corrective actions in the federal planning and finding dated September 27th for federal highways remain unchanged and must be resolved through STIP Amendment number 2. Under organization, we are working on our annual CPA audit for our 501c3 corporation due to the amount of revenue and expenditures we had this past federal fiscal year. We are now in the category of a federal single audit, so there will be a little bit of additional work and additional expense with our CPA firm to carry out that audit. So we'll continue to work on that through this month and next month, and our audited financial statements and our draft tax return will be presented to the board in either January or February at those meetings. And then under public outreach, we are working on a glossary of terms and acronyms that we all use here at Fast Planning, which can be confusing at times, especially for some of our new board members. The Anchorage MPO has put together a really wonderful glossary of terms and acronyms they use, which are the same ones that we use, and they posted that to their website. It doesn't always spell out these acronyms and terms that we use, but it provides a definition of each of those. So a simple, just, one sentence for each that describes what that is. And so Olivia Lunsford is working on that to get that posted to our website. We hope to have that ready soon to share with the general public, our board, and all of our committees. We've also prepared the final comment response summary to our local electric vehicle infrastructure implementation plan. Our consultant team has prepared the final revisions to that plan. That this is an action item here today for the board underneath item 8A to consider adopting the final revised plan. And so we'll discuss that later in the meeting. And then underneath funding, we have prepared a preliminary draft of our first amendment to our transportation improvement program for our short-term funding plan. And that was transmitted to DOT for internal review on December 10th. We do have some outstanding items within that that I'm still waiting on responses from DOT. But we are hoping to bring that forward to the technical committee and policy board to release for public comment either in January or February. So that'll be imminent as long as we get the information that we need. On page 10 in your packet, we have the action items from the December 4th technical committee meeting. They did unanimously recommend to the board to adopt the final revised electric vehicle plan at today's meeting. Also related to another action item here today, they did recommend that the board support the state's adopted safety performance targets for 2025. And that was unanimous. And then related to the operating agreement edits, which is an informational item for discussion here today, they did make a motion at the board to recommend that the edits be tabled indefinitely for those edits to the operating agreement. So that was not unanimous, but that motion did prevail at the December meeting of the technical committee. That concludes my report, but I was hoping to call on Jason Olds online, if he could give us a brief update on the submittal of the state's implementation plan for air quality for the PM 2.5 area, the amendments that were submitted to the EPA, and hoping he can also provide commentary on the conformity freeze if there's any information that he could share.
Sure. So the state did submit full SIP amendment for the Fairbanks North Starborough PM25 serious non-attainment area on, I believe the signature date was the 5th, but don't quote me. We've got all of that to EPA. We're anticipating final decision publication in the Federal Register either around the end of the month or first week of January. And with that, the EPA is planning to make an interim final decision on the conformity freeze sometime following within about 30 days or so. We could see a lifting of the conformity freeze if the SIP is fully approved, as we might anticipate. And so any amendments or projects that are currently subject to the conformity freeze could move forward after that date. We're sort of confirming that timeline, but would anticipate that we could see some of those projects move forward for the construction season this coming summer if we're able to process necessary amendments and get that funds allocated and such. So, fair summary. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions for either Jackson or Jason? The board?
I have one question. Have either of you heard anything about the sequencing of projects that are on hold right now because of the conformity freeze? What I mean is we have a TIP amendment coming out. Can we put some of the projects on the TIP with like an asterisk that says, pending the freeze being lifted, or do we have to wait until it's lifted before we go out for public comment?
So administrative modification number 4, we did put that asterisk on there in that note for those specific projects that they are on hold until the conformity freeze is lifted, at which time we will do an amendment to get funding restored to those projects. So that was in admin mod number 4.
Anyone else? Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Olds, for that hopefully good information. Maybe you said this and I missed it, but you submitted it, we're hoping to hear back soon. Is there a time frame for when EPA would get back to us if they approve the SIP, and so that we can know when the clock starts on the conformity freeze lift?
So it's two separate actions, and I would defer to EPA, sort of Bill Dunbar in their press office in Region 10 with any specifics on the Federal Register notice and a press release that they might do with that action. And that would be either around December 30th or the first week in January is sort of their timeline for when that could be published. The interim final decision, we're trying to pin down exactly on when they can do that, but that is a separate action from the SIP that addresses just elements of the sanction clock, including the conformity freeze. And that, if that is issued, sometime in the 30 days after publication in the Federal Register, would be effective at that date. So the conformity freeze could be effective late January or early February.
Thank you, Mr. Rolls. Follow up on that. Mr. Fox, do you have any idea how that would impact, maybe this is a Northern Region question, bids for that project to turn dirt this summer, or are we looking at 26 instead?
Bids for which project?
The conformity free projects.
Oh, those particular projects. I don't know the status. The projects that we're talking about that are on hold right now include the Steves Johansson interchange, Old Steves reconstruction, and Airport Cushman intersection. So I don't know the design status or the right-of-way status of those projects at this time.
Okay.
But I think the one project that may be able to move forward this summer, at least with some of the demolition activities, would be the Airport Cushman intersection project. If there is statewide funding, federal funding through statewide apportionments that's provided to it.
Thank you.
So that's about all I can say about that.
Jason, thank you for the good news, just in time for Christmas. The first good news we've had in quite a while. Okay, that's up there. That brings us to item number 6, updates from Alaska DOT on statewide transportation improvement program.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. This is Catherine Keith. Happy to provide an update, and then we do have a couple of our staff here, so please jump in if you have anything further. Brett Nelson's in the room here with us, and Ben White is on the line. So with our upcoming STIP amendment number 2, at the last policy board meeting, I had stated that we were working to get out for public comment amendment for on December 7th. And at that time, we were in Washington, D.C., working with our federal partners, Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration to work through some of the mechanics of the corrective actions and what we wanted to do ahead of release of this amendment. One of the items that they wanted us to do was to have a version and then put it out to Federal Highways and FTA for a preliminary review. And we've done this before, provide an initial draft and then prior to public comment, work through any of these mechanics. And so that's what we're doing. This week, we'll be providing this advanced copy to the agencies and then work through if there any formatting changes, concerns about eligibility, what they're able to review during this time. We'll take that feedback and then incorporate it before going out for public comment. Another benefit of this few week delay is being able to work more closely with the MPOs on projects, the amount of money that should be programmed into projects in the MPA area, whether or not it's within the sub allocation that the MPO that we program into the TIPs, or if it's our state funding, we do show those funds going on to the TIP, and we need to know how much that is so that it can get added into the next amendment. And then we don't have any delays in projects that need to happen in the area. So that back and forth is happening right now, looking at when projects should go to maintain fiscal constraint within the MPO, and then our own fiscal constraint statewide, so that we have enough money programmed where it needs to be, but we're not over programmed by double counting projects. So this has been a good process, and that process, that 3C process, will be going on over several weeks. We'll have the updated version out for public comment. We're targeting January 7th now. So we'll get through the holidays, and then public will have 30 days to review this amendment. So yeah, looking forward to that. There aren't many changes to the formatting of it itself, and that's been a comment over the months, is that there's so many changes with the formatting, you know, let's try to keep it consistent. And thankfully, we are able to do that this time. There weren't a lot of comments related to the actual structure of the document. So that part will be the same. And I will say, though, there are a large number of changes to projects themselves, just because of cost estimates changing, things that were programmed for 24 or planned for 24 or pushed out to 25. And so all of those adjustments have this trickle down effect on our whole program. And therefore, while there may not be a substantial amount of changes themselves within the project, the dollar amounts and timelines are may be revised. So please, to the policy board and to the public, and let us know as you have questions or comments on that, please reach out. If the policy board would like to go over the release before it goes out for public comment, we can certainly go through any of the changes together, and maybe, unfortunately, it's over the holidays. So it's difficult to find a time, especially when we're in between meetings. But Mr. Chair, if that's something you'd like, the department's happy to accommodate that and go through the document. And if there's anything that we can help prepare that the policy board would make it easier to review, you know, we can do that also. There's a lot of flexibility in our system to provide information just upon request. And then the last thing we can say about this, and one of the changes with this upcoming document is the detailed project pages themselves. So we have a lot of programs in our TIP. There's about 80 of them, including our pavement and bridge preservation program, our highway safety improvement program, our bridge inspections. Everything has a program that gives us some flexibility to account for, you know, year by year changes in priorities based on pavement condition or bridge deterioration and those things. So we do have project pages, though, for every one of those programs that will be made publicly available and upon request too in a PDF form. So for our pavement and bridge preservation, we have a list of about 100 projects that are over the 4 years. So you can see where those funds are getting spent. And we have those pages already provided to projects within the MPO, so you can see those precise projects, which typically have been a program on the TIP. So we hope that that'll help with transparency, increase our ability to communicate about the projects and have input on changing priorities within those projects. So I'll stop there. Happy to answer questions and just look forward to having this amendment out.
Any questions? Cool. Yeah, I really like to have that presentation.
Great.
When you have them, as soon as you can.
Absolutely.
And then we'll make sure we put that on the agenda. Just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nick?
Are these the amendments that came out of the discussions you guys had in DC during the last meeting?
Yes, through the chair, they will have some of the comments that pertain to the amendment. And we try to be more clear in the fiscal constraint tables where funds are going into a metro area and where funds are being spent in a non-metro area. That was recent feedback that we received, which should help us be able to quantify how, you know, what should be programmed in the TIP. That's because of the funding available, for example, versus what's not, like separating that out on our fiscal constraint. So that could be one thing that'll make it easier. And other project changes are reviewing, updating any eligibility where there's specific projects that have questions on eligibility. We're working through to provide additional documentation. We're changing the language and the scope so it's more clear what we're doing within that.
So these are the changes that will be resulting from the discussions you had when you and the staff flew to DC when you zoomed in on the last meeting. You were talking about those being hopefully productive meetings. Have we hammered out the details we're going to need to get the STIP money on all of it turn and into the budget this year, onto into projects and dirt turned this coming summer as soon as we can?
We absolutely hope so and are working hard towards that. The primary change within the project programming would be adding back in the Gina Bridge project. So that would be one programming project, although we had that in the amendment. In the previous amendment, that will be included here. Beyond that, a large majority of the comments had to do with our public comment process and making sure that that's available online. There were comments about our 3C coordination and how we are drafting the process itself for that, which there'd been a substantial work on. So all of these things are included in this upcoming amendment. So our staff do feel confident that we're meeting the intention of all of those corrective actions and recommendations. But with ongoing conversation with Federal Highways and FTA, we'll be making future adjustments as everybody's kind of learning and evolving with our procedures as we go. So short answer is yes, I believe they're all included.
So,
Yeah.
thank you, Mr. Chair. You were down there, you were saying it was making decent progress. There's a 25-page response from the state, the federal government to DOT here on all the changes that we need to make. Did you guys come to agreement on all 25 of those pages to be able to make these amendments so that there's not more ripples in the future and we can expect a smooth process going forward?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that no, we haven't come to agreement. There are some primary differences in what the state may consider the regulations versus perhaps what the federal partners are seeing as regulations. So we'll talk more about that as we go in this conversation. In other areas, what we had requested, we listed and prepared a 30-page response to those federal planning findings because we had requested additional information on a lot of them. There was several of the findings that were not very clear on what we should change in order to meet or resolve the corrective action. So for us, we lacked clarity from some of the vague recommendations. We have talked to FHWA and FTA about this, and from their side, they don't want to be prescriptive because they want for us to develop a process that meets their requirements. So we're kind of both trying to meet in the middle here with us trying to interpret what they're looking for without them directly saying what they're looking for. So it's a difficult question to answer because as we get greater clarity on items, we feel we're getting closer to where we're seeing that we all want our STIP to be. This I think will be a continuum or evolution of this document. For example, discretionary grants took a substantial amount of discussion in the findings, and there were 18 projects, 19 I believe, that were told to be removed from our STIP, which were discretionary grants. Our request was to be provided a list of the actual programs that need to be included in our STIP, because if a community has a grant anywhere in the state, and if it's funded through Title 23 or Title 49 funds, they need to be added to our STIP. And if they're not, the community doesn't get their grant award. So we'll get requests from communities saying, please get our project added to your amendment so we can move forward. The difficulty is it's not every Title 23 project. Some of the NOFOs within it have language that exclude it from having to be in there. So when we've had those projects listed, we've received a corrective action saying, take it out. We requested from headquarters, USDOT headquarters, to please give us this list. It's federal highways grant programs. Can't you give us a list of what has to be in our STIP so we get it right and don't risk community projects? They don't have a list. Like, they're not going to make one there. It's not available. They're not sure what that list is. So we don't understand why we have a corrective action if they can't give us a list and guidance so that we can prevent delays for community driven projects. So there's topics like this that we're still going back and forth on, and we hope put a document forward that everyone's proud of, including our federal partners and our NPO partners. But there'll be items like this that we may continue going back and forth on a little bit until things like that become more clear, like what's expected, to be in our document. Happy to provide more details, but, we can get into the weeds on this too, but that's,
I might have missed earlier. What is the deadline for amendment number 2?
While there isn't a hard deadline, we have projects that need to get programmed into this amendment so that they can be put out for bid this spring and for construction this summer. We wanted to get through to an approved SIP by the middle of February. We're a little bit behind that, so it's likely now not until the first part of March, but we're hopeful we can provide as much information to Federal Highways and FTA so that we can ideally get to our approved document at that time. So I would say March 15th is a pretty solid date that we really need to have our document approved by without holding back projects.
Any other policy board members having any questions? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to number 7. This is public comment period. This would be on any item that we have here that is not an action item. Would be 8A, as you see here, we're gonna have testimony later on that, 9A. We're gonna start in the room here. Is there anybody wishing to give public testimony? Go ahead.
Do you want me to just sit here or kneel at the?
Why don't you come stand up so we can pick you up in the microphone? maybe?
Stand up.
You want to move a chair up to?
Jerry, that's scary.
Find a chair.
I will kneel.
We got you. There you go, Jen. No, you won't.
Thank you. That's a cool chair.
Like you're on a desk.
Like I'm on a deck.
Just give your name for the record.
My name is Jenny Campbell and I am here to speak specifically to new business E, which I know you're not having as an action item today, but is a point of discussion. And I just want to say that I encourage in your discussions to consider upholding the technical committee's recommendation of tabling indefinitely the changes to the intergovernmental operating agreement. A few reasons. On page 138 is a memo from old Mayor Bryce Ward to Ryan Anderson. And in that memo, and I believe it's dated October 14th or thereabouts. In that memo, Mayor Hopkins, are you okay if I say Mayor Ward? Okay. In that memo, Mayor Ward strongly encourages this body to not take any action until these changes have been vetted by the city of Fairbanks, the city of North Pole, the Borough Assembly, legal, and any changes that they might recommend be incorporated before it's taken up and acted on upon with this body, to have a more efficient process and to eliminate any back and forthing. So that's one reason I encourage you to uphold the technical committee's recommendation to table. The other is that as a layperson, read through this and not sort of trying to track all of the, they're not statutes, but, the technical following of all of the, codes that are mentioned. It really feels to me like these changes take away local control for fast planning. And I think local control and the local planning process have been working very well. And I think that process should not be mucked with because process matters. Following the process that has worked historically takes into account a lot of public comment. It takes into account, the law, and it really builds public trust. And by jumping to this item and not being vetted very thoroughly through all of the bodies that we have here in Fairbanks. You know, it's kind of going to reduce public trust in the process, and that really bothers me and concerns me. So that's all I have to say. I think Mayor Ward put things out there very clearly in his memo, and it really ought to be considered. Thank you.
Jenny. Let's see if we have any questions here. Does anyone have questions?
Great, thanks.
Anyone else in the room? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Mary Farrell, and I live here in Fairbanks. I'm kind of gonna say a lot of the same things that Jenny said. I didn't know she was gonna say exactly those things, but I just wanted to state that I fully support the Fast Planning Technical Committee's recommendation to table the changes to the Fast Planning Operating Agreement. I've read through these changes, and I don't see that they are really necessary, or in some cases even applicable to this group. And what bothers me is, in reading through the packet, was it seems like that in some ways holding approval of the MPO's boundary expansion hostage to changes that DOT would like added to this agreement is not only unacceptable, but I question whether it's legal. I don't even find anything that leads me to believe that the two are related, so I question why we're doing it that way. Fast Planning has a well-deserved reputation as an honest broker for local transportation issues, and I would like to thank the board for their diligence and hard work. And I encourage you to follow the technical committee's recommendation when this comes up for action to table the changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Hi, Gabby. Come on over. I didn't see you back there.
Hi, I'm Gabby Larry. I wasn't actually sure what I was going to say, but the reason I'm down here today is because there was a very strong article in the letter to the editor written by Scott Crass. So if you haven't looked at it, I recommend it. He kind of summed up some concerns, and generally, I think a healthy dialogue and a healthy conversation goes a long way on all parties concerned. And I think these changes that the ladies previously talked about are very concerning. DOT is a really strong player in our state, but I think what leads down to the line when you have a community of, you know, as broad as ours is and how diverse ours is, and it extends outward, we need to have that conversation included. You can't eliminate that. And this committee, our local government, does such a good job on watching and participating. That should never be eliminated. That should also be of high concern. Again, DOT is a big, strong player in our state, and they don't always see the will of the communities or the people. A lot of dollars and infrastructure money goes that route. We need to be really diligent and focused. I appreciate your time, and I sincerely enjoyed what everyone said earlier. And I appreciate you listening to our comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Any questions? Anyone else in the room? So anyone online that would like to give testimony?
We have Barbara Schumann unmuted.
Hi, Barbara.
Yes. Hi. Thank you very much for allowing us to share our concerns. I am a member of the Advocates for Safe Alaska Highways, but today I am expressing my personal viewpoint only. I'd like to again join Gabby in thanking Assemblyman Crass for his comments in the newspaper. I thought they were very well put, and I agreed with him entirely. I urge you to not only follow the recommendation of the technical committee to, you know, just table the substantive changes recommended or asked by Alaska DOT, but I ask you to reject the substantive changes. I realize that the governor is withholding approval of the boundary change to FAST's area of responsibility because the flood control bridge is one of his pet projects. The proposed changes to the intergovernmental operating agreement, even if they were approved, might not convince the governor to do as he's required to by federal law to recognize changes in population, requiring that additional area now be incorporated into the municipal planning agency's boundaries. The flood control bridge itself is one of those boondoggle projects that municipal planning agencies were created to avoid. It was added at the last minute. As far as I know, it's not been part of any planning process. It's not needed. The existing bridges work just fine for regular traffic. Overweight loads can take the bypass route on the valley floor and travel off the bridges. And there are other alternatives to this bridge proposal, like building better access to the valley floor for northbound overweight loads, or building a separate industrial road to Fort Knox. From the flood control project itself, an industrial road could be built nearly due north to Fort Knox, avoiding and bypassing the serious non-attainment areas of North Pole and Fairbanks, and providing a shorter, more direct route. The bridge is not safe or satisfactory. It's not safe as it's not as safe as the two bridges we have, and it provides, at least the last I heard, no pedestrian or bicycle accommodations. It puts all northbound and southbound traffic within a few feet of each other on one bridge span. So, I wonder even if a new bridge will be completed in time for the Manh Choh ore haul, which has been promised to be just temporary. So I ask you to follow federal law, to uphold the planning process that the federal law is intended to provide. Please urge the governor to recognize the census numbers and the required boundary change, and require all governmental units to cooperate and coordinate planning for our transportation needs. Please discourage last-minute boondoggle projects and favor those that are truly needed and are a reasonable expenditure of public funds. One such project would be a continuation of the bicycle path from North Pole to Eielson and beyond. I hope you support that and the recommendation of the technical committee and table and reject the substantive changes that Alaska DOT has proposed to the operating agreement. Please just follow the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Schuman? Seeing none, thank you again.
Patrice Lee is unmuted.
Yes.
Hi, Patrice. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am speaking today with my Citizens for Clean Air hat on, but in the sense of transparency, I'm acting as coordinator of advocates for Safe Alaska Highways at this time. We're sharing the responsibilities as we're able. I would like to say that right now we are in an air quality alert, stage 2 in North Pole, stage 1, and the air that you are breathing is not healthy. So first, I want to talk about the meeting that happened in Washington, D.C. with Commissioner Ryan Anderson and Ms. Keith, acting director of DOT. That was very disappointing to us when we heard that meeting happen, because we saw no notice of that meeting. We certainly did not see any invitation to that meeting. And in discussion with tribes, stakeholders, and other affected people in the community, we realized that, none of us had been involved in that. So I'd like to ask, what changed between 2 denials and now an approval? I don't know what that is, but I would like to find out, and I would like you to research it. I'm going to stop there and say that I want to be associated specifically with the comments of Jenny Campbell, Mary Farrell, Gabby, Larry, and Barbara Schuman. Everything they said, I agree with completely. especially the technical committee's advice to table and or reject these changes. When private meetings happen, that's precisely why we need a local planning committee. We need to have a voice, and we need to protect what's best for our community. And we learned the hard way when we lost our air quality control in the borough, and it went all to the state. We lost a significant voice as a community in dealing with that issue. And 15 years later, we're still breathing dirty air. So now I want to switch for a moment to the trucks and the ore going to Golden Valley, going to Fort Knox and being powered by Golden Valley Electric Association. They're running, to my knowledge, 24/7 milling that, which is using a huge amount of power. The mine is, to my understanding, an interruptible customer, but all of the energy they're using is being generated in the Fairbanks North Star Borough non-attainment area. And we have lost our Cook Inlet gas. We are going to lose our Bradley Lake cleaner, less expensive energy from January till probably the beginning of April or possibly beyond as they fix transmission lines. So that means we're left burning coal, naphtha, diesel, and naphtha being jet fuel. And the mine is getting its full need, and we're paying the price for that being generated, the extra. If we didn't have to provide power for them, there may be a few more days that Zender plant and whatnot downtown with no filters at all wouldn't be turned on. In other words, what I'm saying is there is a very likely possibility that as we burn the dirtiest of fuels available in the non-attainment area to power that mine, we are going to possibly not meet attainment. And, Citizens for Clean Air is in association with various legal environmental groups, and we're doing the best we can, and also the Federal Highway. I want to now move to constraint. When I say constraint, I mean conformity freeze. I'm using those interchangeably, and that may not be correct, but bear with me. The conformity freeze constraint happened because we didn't clean up our air. Citizens for Clean Air gave the legislator and local leaders 17 ways that we could have avoided this years and years ago, and none of them were taken up. The federal government has given us $42 million to clean up our air, and our air is not cleaned up. If we just go ahead and allow whatever projects to happen when they don't meet the criteria for waiver of constraint or waiver of conformity freeze, however you want to say it, this Chena floodplain project does not meet those criteria in law based on my research. And I'm asking every available legal person I can find to help me understand that better, because I don't think that it does meet the criteria. It's a whole new project that was put in at the last minute that's for the ore haul. If the ore haul wasn't happening, I highly doubt we would even be talking about this project. We need the money, the federal highway money, for legitimate projects that would meet the waiver constraint. The last thing I want to say is that Citizens for Clean Air has tried to be a partner. We're not anybody's enemy. We're speaking for the people who need clean air to breathe. A generation of Fairbanks children has likely not met their potential because they've been breathing dirty air since they were little kids. And if there is no consequence for not cleaning up our air, and we can just waive everything and the law doesn't really matter, as Barbara said, why aren't we following the law? The law was to protect us. And it seems as though every cheaty little way to get around it is happening. The MPO boundary should have been examined in the last census boundary to include the projected growth of the area, which would have included beyond, I believe, the present old boundary the governor will not recognize. We feel that this whole thing is a strong arm to our local MPO to force us to give up some of the control that we desperately need to have a say at all. So, I'm sorry if that came across a little bit heavy-handed, but it's so disappointing to see this happening. And we do want to be involved. We do want to help where we can. We want safety for our community, whether that's the air we breathe or the roads we drive on. We want to be part of a safer, better community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Thanks again. Anyone else?
Not seeing any yet.
We're not seeing anyone else. We're going to go ahead and close public comments at this time. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to 8A, Fairbanks and North Pole Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Implementation Plan, which is an action item. At the city, we usually do things different, and I was talking to the staff at a meeting here a week or two ago, and when we have meetings there, unless there's a motion on the floor, we don't have any discussion. But here we've done it differently, and we're going to follow the traditions of the organization here. So first, what we're going to do is take public testimony, then we'll have a staff report, and then we'll entertain a motion. So anyone wishing to testify on the EV infrastructure implementation plan?
I'd like to say something about an electric vehicle thing, actually.
Electric vehicle thing?
So, yeah, my name is Gabby Larry, and I'm in the motorsports business, and motorsports also has engaged with electric vehicles and electric bicycles, and so we've tried them out. They're not as a common item as people would think, especially on our interior. And it's very difficult to get a gas-powered customer to switch over. So if you talk about the infrastructure, it's a lot of times it's a distance thing. People want to be able to commute, but they don't want to charge up. They want to go or a ride maybe to the park and back, but they don't want to stop long, or they want to keep going. And that's the message I'm getting from our customers. So we brought in a hybrid to see how that would go, and that didn't go. It's still there on the floor. They want to see it, but they don't want to buy it. So, and I read the article in the paper that said similar, like the dealerships aren't bringing in a high number of these vehicles. Well, they don't also, you still have to figure out a way to charge the batteries. The batteries, you got to figure out a way to dispose of them. Our normal disposal company that disposes of our batteries won't take these type of batteries. So that's a problem. And I see more problems that we'd be facing. I mean, I hope that these things are all considered, because you can charge the vehicle doesn't mean you're not going to have another issue that comes abroad with it. So charging them, literally, I'm afraid of them personally, because I know people that have had fires, hazardous issues in their garages and such because of their batteries. And that can come down from a electric bicycle to another electric item. So I'm afraid of them, and I won't charge anything unless I'm sitting there like in a building and it's going to be charged up. It's going to be in the building being charged. I've talked to fire marshals and such, and in the different areas, from even one from Port Greeley, they said they had an electric vehicle and all they could do is sit there, that caught ignited, and all they could do is sit there and watch it. There was no way to put out the fire. So I'm trying to figure out how, I mean, the dollars are coming in, maybe we aren't going to be expending them, but as a rule, I don't see any favor in the long run in these electric vehicles. You still have to charge them, you still have to power up the generator, you still have to use your electricity. Granted, it might be cheaper than fuel, but at the same time, there's a backlash to all of this, and I think that's what we're seeing. And unless you're in California, Nevada, somewhere where you can actually use this, we're not in that right climate for these things. So before you go gung-ho, I'm just saying, there's a limit to how far you can go. And there are people that will probably, I know a few customers that are generally interested in it because it's the new techie thing, and that kind of gets their excitement up. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of restrictions that go with the electric vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabby. Mayor.
Thank you. And just for clarification, as we're looking at this plan and where those, the federal dollars would come into fund, where we would put the chargers, do you feel it's better to have those chargers around the communities so people's houses can be safe?
I think that it's a concern that, I mean, if the person is investing in, you know, there should definitely be some safety thought about it, how and where they should be plugging these into. Is it, you know, making sure they have the right, it's just, you know, hookups in their homes, not just, hey, here's your battery pack, go home and charge it up. I mean, it is a concern. And not just citywide, but then, you know, if you're commuting from here to, let's say, Salsha, would you want someone to have a hookup so they can continue down the road? I've almost ran out of gas, and thank God they had a pump where I could stick in a card, right? Or even down at Campwell, you know, is that, you know, even though it's out of our jurisdiction, so to speak, but it needs to be considered because people need to be charging along the route if they're gonna go any distance. They might, you know, have to do that in the middle of the night. Clearly.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on this action item? Public testimony is closed. And the staff report.
Yeah, I promise I'll be brief. Beginning on page 15, I do have a simple memo to the board of what the action is requested of the board today, as well as the background for this planning effort. The action we're requesting today is for the board to consider adopting the final revised plan. I'm not going to represent the entire plan to you all here today, but just to note that we did release this for a 30-day public comment period, which was open from October 13th through November 12th. We also had an open house event for the draft plan on November 7th at the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center. Compared to other planning efforts, we didn't receive a lot of public comments. We only received 17 during that 30-day window. But we have, in response to those comments, made some minor revisions to the plan, as well as included in an appendix to the plan now all of the comments and the responses to each of those comments as part of the document. The biggest revision that was made to the document was adding a new section. It's called EV 101, which if you want to scroll to it in your packets on page 30. And really for anybody picking up this plan, whether it's a member of the public or a committee member or a board member, you know, this adding some information, you know, describing the different types of electric vehicles, whether it be a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid or a full battery EV, as well as an explanation of the different levels of charging stations, which relate to how fast this page charging occurs. It was 10 on the bottom, but up in the right-hand corner, it's hard to see.
Yeah, we don't see those numbers. So be page 10 if you can read on
the bottom, yeah, bottom right-hand corner. And then on the bottom right, it would be page 58. I'm sorry, not 58. Page A2. Or on the PDF corner, you'll see page 84. You can see the public comments that we did receive and then the responses to each of those comments. So those are really the biggest additions to this plan. And as far as next steps, if the board does approve or adopt this plan here today, next month I'll be putting together a call for project nominations for site hosts for electric vehicle charging stations. I did speak to Clayworth and Mayor Hopkins and Mr. Kratz yesterday about this. That I'll draft up a package for that call for project nominations, including the new criteria that we learned as we developed this plan, meaning that the electric vehicle charging stations have to have a minimum of 4 ports per site, et cetera. There's different federal requirements that we've got to meet with the type of infrastructure that we may invest in. And then put together the details of the funding that we've set aside for constructing these electric vehicle charging stations, so we can open up the conversation with our technical committee and policy board on how much you want to potentially invest in this and where you think some of the higher priority sites might be for installation of charging stations, as well as discussions about the ongoing operations and maintenance of these, which we assume will be done by a third party and not the responsibility of our local governments. So that concludes my staff report. I'll just last note that the technical committee did recommend that the board adopt this final revised plan without any further revision.
For the record, I'd like to point out Mayor Church's on board with us too. Any questions from policy board to Jackson?
I don't have a question, but a general comment is just, well done on this report. At statewide, DOT's been implementing the NEVI program, which is in partnership with Alaska Energy Authority. And, all of our staff has had a big learning curve because of the Title 23 requirements that come with it. It's kind of extremely complicated, and the procurement has been a hurdle for us. We're working to establish that alternative fuel corridor from Anchorage up to Fairbanks. So yeah, I think this is an excellent document and addresses a lot of these challenges. So yeah, good luck in implementation, and look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jackson? Mayor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 41 of the whole packet, 21 of the plan, there's a layout of where the request for sites has been. When you put out the RFP, are you going to allow the bidder to decide where of those 35 sites they would put them, or is that something we're going to be prescriptive in that bid?
No, it would be very prescriptive. There has to be design drawings and specifications that are prepared for each individual site, because we're, in any event, for this call for applications, these are the ones that we received last year. So this was, interest by the borough, the two cities, University of Alaska Fairbanks. So when we do our new call for project nominations, what we want is our local governments and the people that previously applied to either, reconfirm, do you still want a station, or make any modifications to the application that now we know you have to have a minimum of 4 ports at each station, but we did receive some applications for just 2 ports. So for example, so the game has changed a little bit. We also hope to provide a rough cost range, or if you want to install a level 2 charger versus a level 3 charger, so that the applicants understand when they pay the 9% match to access these funds, how much that might be, for budgeting purposes at the city or at the borough assembly level, or even for private site hosts. So like, for example, we know that the Fairbanks Daily News Monitor is interested in being a site host, and they are relying on the Sneddon Foundation to pay the 9% match, but they need to know how much to plan for that payment, and if they want to continue to be a site host. So, but once all the applications are received, we will have our technical committee score and rank those, put them in priority order for the different sites, and bring that to the board to take a look at. The board can, of course, choose to reprioritize those based on whatever considerations you have, but also the board needs to decide how much you want to invest in these. Right now, we have $500,000 set aside for design and $2 million for installation. But the board obviously has the right to change those amounts if you want to invest more or invest less than the board's previous decision about a year ago. And so this will be brought to the board for approval of a bundle of these charging stations for your consideration.
Any other questions? One online? Online? I have comments later on, but first we need a motion then.
Move to approve revised, move to approve the final and revised plan for adoption.
By Mayor Cruz.
Second.
Is that Mayor Church or Scott? Second by Scott. Okay, discussion board. None.
I look forward to seeing what the bids are and what the process, what people want to have with the new scoping numbers and amounts and requirements. See what these come forward with and see how many we can fit into the allocation that we have. If that's what we want to stick with, I think that will be a important discussion for safety and community use of these going forward. So,
I want to make something clear here, because a lot of the criticism I've heard of people saying, why are you spending precious tip money on EV chargers? We're not. This is federal funds. It's about $2 million, right, total. And looking at the different types of chargers, the fast chargers are quite pricey to put in. Jackson was thinking there's somewhere around 300,000. We heard originally about $1 million. That won't buy you many fast chargers. 2 million. But we are not taking money away from highway projects or any other projects. These are federal funds. And whether these federal funds continue in the next 4 years remains to be seen. So it's really important for us to identify what type of chargers we want. And I have to think if you want this industry to grow, that they're constantly 4 to 10 hours for charging, which is level 2. It won't be a great incentive for that. The fast chargers take 20 minutes to an hour for people who are traveling, whatever. They make more sense, possibly, but we don't know as a board. And we were talking about it yesterday, Mayor Hopkins and Jackson, myself, and Scott. And we're thinking that we possibly should come up with some criteria for, until we send this out to, I guess we go to DOT. Is that right? Eventually to the engineering.
After the sites are selected, yes, that would be transmitted to DOT to initiate the project start to begin design.
We should have some kind of a guidelines and what kind of chargers you want. Where ideally we would like to have in place so that the most people can be accommodated by them. And make it practical for them. We're not here to promote the EV industry. We're here to accommodate them through this federal grant, to speak. So, I think we were talking about having a plan before we send it out. There's some kind of guidelines that the policy board has on how to do the site selection, what type of chargers we ideally would like to see. Anyway, any questions? Anybody from the policy board? Would you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. Mayor Hopkins.
Yeah.
Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Mr. Cleaworth.
Yes.
Mayor Cruz.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
No.
Mr. Krass.
Yes.
Mr. Olds.
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is 5 in favor, 1 opposed. That brings us to item 9 under new business. Alaska 2025 safety performance measure targets. This is an action item also. It's in your packet. First, we'll go to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, is there anyone online wishing to testify? Testimony is closed. We have a staff report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cleaworth. Beginning on page 114 in the packet, I do have another staff memo to the board, which outlines your action here today. The action that we are requesting is 2 different options. We are asking you either to support the state's 2025 safety targets that they just set for themselves, or develop our own safety targets for our metropolitan planning area. This is an annual exercise. We do bring this to the technical committee and board each year as DOT sets their targets each year. From the date in which the state sets their targets, which was this year was August 31st, 2024, we have 180 days to make a decision whether we're going to support the state or develop our own targets for the area. We have been doing this for this will be our 8th year that we're considering this question. But for the past 7 years, each year, the board has decided to simply support the state's targets rather than create our own. And the main reason for that is that the Fairbanks North Pole area have a relatively low contribution to the fatalities and serious injuries to the statewide totals, and we have a lower fatality and serious injury rate than the statewide total. Also, if the state doesn't meet their targets, there's no penalty for the MPO. The penalty is only to DOT, and the penalty is relatively simple. It's not that the feds are gonna withhold any money from the state, but it may reduce the flexibility of the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, which they put on projects statewide. So we've actually discussed this item across 2 different technical committee meetings. We did bring this to them back in November. They postponed their decision on this in November because the technical committee wanted to see the fatalities and serious injury numbers for just our boundary and compare those to the statewide averages. DOT Traffic and Safety did provide those statistics to us, and we presented those to the technical committee on December 4th. And after looking at those and getting the confirmation that our fatality rate and serious injury rate is lower than the statewide averages, the technical committee made a unanimous motion to support the state's targets rather than create our own for our area. And that comparison is shown on page 122 in the packet, so you can see the numbers there. And just of note, we also got an update from DOT Traffic and Safety on the fatalities that we've seen so far in 2024. As of December 4th, the day of our meeting, there were 67 fatalities in the state, which is higher than the previous year in 2023. But what the state's moving forward with for 2025 is on the previous page 121. This is, as I mentioned, the state has been setting safety targets in accordance with the federal regulations for 8 years in a row now. So just looking at that top column, for example, for fatalities, you can see what their targets were in 2018 to the present. So this particular year, 2025, shows a pretty sharp decrease in the target, which may or may not be difficult for the state to achieve. But these targets in the 2025 column come directly out of the recommendations from the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, of which the stakeholder group, all the MPOs had a seat at the table during those meetings. And we really want to try to drive down the fatality and serious injury rate statewide by 3.5% per year. And when you look at that over time, that's where these numbers come from here. But again, looking at 2024, we already have 67 fatalities. There may be, I believe there's actually more fatalities since December 4th in Anchorage with some pedestrians getting hit. So they might be up near 70 right now, but to try to target 62 in 2025 is a kind of a tall order. And it's not just infrastructure projects, there's a lot of enforcement and behavior management, even down to radio PSAs to get the word out. Drunk driving, all the different topics that go into try to drive these rates down. In any event, the technical committee made a motion to support the state's targets again this year for 2025. And the specific targets are right there in red on the right-hand column. And the board can choose to make that motion, or you can direct staff to try to develop our own targets for our area if you'd like to see us do that work.
Thank you. Any questions for Jackson? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I move that we accept the state numbers for the targets for safety on our transportation.
Approved by Mayor Hopkins. There's a second.
Second. Mayor Church.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor. Discussion. None. Call the roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
Mayor Cruz.
Yes.
Mayor Hopkins.
Yes.
Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
Mr. Kraft.
Yes.
And Mr. Olds.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. That brings us to item 9 and B as a boy. FY 2023-27 Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP amendment, pages 123 to 126. Anyone walk us through that?
Yeah, beginning on page 123, yeah, this is just an informational item today. This is basically my summary of anticipated changes for our new amendment to our Transportation Improvement Program document, which is our short-range funding plan. This particular amendment I've been working on for about a month now, and I did release a preliminary draft of the amendment to DOT for internal review last week on December 10th. The summary of the major changes that you're going to see in this amendment largely relates to Highway Safety Improvement Program projects. So we are, at the request of DOT, adding in 5 new Highway Safety Improvement Program projects, many of which likely the Technical Committee and Policy Board have not heard of before. We also have 2 existing Highway Safety Improvement Program projects that have new estimates for the construction phase, and we need to add that construction funding into our funding plan. We'll be removing one project that was already constructed. That's 4th Avenue in downtown. That was built underneath an ADA improvement program. And then, as Ms. Keith alluded to earlier in the meeting, we also have 4 discretionary grants within our boundary that we need to show within this document. And then related to a couple of programs, the preventative maintenance programs, we need to add in the new project site selected. This does include the fast improvement program for construction in 2025 and 2026. And then also adding in the new project site selected for the ADA improvements program, which is largely in downtown Fairbanks. And then everything else is minor changes in coordination with the additional information DOT requested. We'll be adding in total project costs, including the years prior to the current funding plan. We're adding in termini and project length to each of the project descriptions, and we're identifying which projects are exempt and non-exempt from air quality conformity. We're also removing, at the request of Federal Highways and DOT, removing the illustrative projects in our funding table. These are the projects that are have been scored as high priority projects, but we do not yet have funding programmed for them. So they don't have any real money on them yet. We just have their cost estimates in there. We're removing those from our funding table, but we're just going to relocate them into the narrative of the document so that they won't be lost. But basically, these are the projects that are grandfathered in. So when we begin to receive additional funding in out years, these are the projects we're likely going to start first as far as program funding for. And then based on updated schedules for at least 5 projects in our funding plan, the construction phase is being delayed by 1 or 2 years. So that funding is being moved out to match the new project schedule. And I guess I'll stop there for this page, but the specific projects that are being affected are shown on pages 124 and 125. So you can look at that list. So you can see the project titles of which projects are being added, which projects are being removed, and which projects their construction phase is being delayed by 1 or 2 years. And then page 126, I have an overall schedule. Again, the preliminary draft of this was turned into DOT on December 10th. There are some outstanding information requests. We still don't have total project costs for a number of projects. We have a few projects that we don't have the project description yet for. And also there are some discrepancies between funding amounts between different documents that I received. So I'll be working internally with DOT to resolve all those. My hope is to bring this draft amendment to the Technical Committee and Policy Board in January to release for a 30-day public comment period. But it may slide until February. It would be wonderful if our conformity freeze was lifted in January so that we could actually include in this amendment those projects that are not exempt from air quality conformity to get them shored up and back on track. And again, that would be Steese Johansson, Old Steese reconstruction, and airport intersection. So strategically, we may want to delay that if the conformity freeze being lifted is actually imminent. So I'm going to keep doing my work, and I'm going to go through the holidays, and we'll see what happens on January 2nd when we all get back to task here and see what has transpired. In any event, this is a pretty big lift for us here internally, and this is what we're working on right now, and it is subject to change this month.
Any questions from board members?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Subject to change is the timeline sort of as workload flows or more of the project specifics.
I was primarily referencing the project specifics. Okay. So.
Follow up on that, Mr. Chair? Sure. Before we put these into amendments into our local tip, I guess this is a question for DOT. Are you going to be putting these through the public process? If you look at page 126, it shows that there's a number of opportunities in public comment and things like that, but it's got to go through us first before we approve them and put them out to the public and then put them into our tip. Are you planning on bringing these to the public and making sure that they are projects that are wanted and then come back to us and say yay or nay on these? And what is your timeline for that and the process too?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, just a couple clarifying comments. Is that HSIP specifically
The
or?
PD Nordale Road Roundabout, would love to hear how they feel about that one. Northern Region signal upgrades, Northern Region accessible pedestrian signal upgrades, Peridot Street crossing to Richardson Highway, Richardson Highway variable speed limit signs, those 5 specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually fantastic that these are included in the TIP now. Previously, the way that it's been done is a highway safety improvement program. So there's been a program, say $10 million that's gone into the TIP, I believe, right, Jackson? Or have you listed that?
No, so I actually looked back at the record from the start of our MPO. We've actually listed the HSIP projects individually, going back to when we first had our initial tip, and we're continuing that practice. There are other programs though, like the preventative maintenance, where it's just one line item and we don't know what the project sites are. But HSIP has always been individually listed.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. With the AMATs, we've done it a different way. So in this case, the HSIP projects, they do go through a very thorough process where there's project nominations that come from DOT, from the MPOs, the technical committees go through and select projects, right? And put those forward as recommendations. So that comes up with a highway safety improvement program plan, and then that gets submitted to federal highways, and that's an annual plan. And it's very much based on the, it's a formula driven plan. So projects that have a specific number of incidences, projects that have high traffic throughput. It's precise, it's not qualitative. What is qualitative is the projects that get put forward to be scored, and that tends to be based on high known areas of incidences. So what I would just offer up is that by getting them on the tip here, that is the public process. And if there's comments or concerns about these projects, then that would be great to talk through those. Ideally, moving forward, we do that at the point of nomination, so that projects, before they get nominated for the program, that they have, some consistency beyond perhaps the technical committee and the policy board at that time. But these are, that's the process for the highway safety improvement program projects. So if there are concerns during the public comment process, it'd be great to have those, and we can bring that back as we evaluate these projects. The last thing on this is that every year we create a new plan. So if there's a project that no longer has the highest priority, they fall out of the plan, and then they don't get funded as we go forward. If it's a project in the middle of construction, then that becomes a bit more complicated. But for projects that haven't yet started, they may not always be a high priority. So there's this opportunity to keep evaluating the safety projects. But altogether, over like the 4 years, we have about $30 million that's going into safety projects in the Fairbanks area.
I'm thinking follow up on that, Mr. Chair. Jackson, I guess it'd be a question to you, Mr. Fox. These projects are not in the TIP yet, correct?
No.
So we need as the board here to approve them going into the TIP before they do.
Yes.
And you at Northern Region, back to you, DOT, are going to go out to the public and hold open houses and listen to people about these specific projects and then recommend them to us?
Or not.
Or not?
Yeah, the opportunity for commenting on these projects, I would suggest there's a presentation that could be given on these projects. But if they're not supported by the Fairbanks or by this MPO, the action would be to not include them in the TIP, in which case, we wouldn't be moving forward with those projects. Other projects would be moved forward. So that would be the recommendation. And happy to do open houses and have a presentation. Our safety team, I know, would be more than happy to come talk about them. So that, if there is the consensus that like a particular project isn't in the best interest of the Fairbanks area, then that we would really want to know about that. And that should not be included in the TIP.
Thank you. So are you putting the onus on, fast planning, to do those open houses and have the decision, or is that your guys' job? And what is your timeline to figure out what that comment is? We can have opinions here for the 6 of us. But here for the public, if that's gonna be something you guys are doing, what is your timeline for doing that before you then recommend these projects or don't recommend these projects to us based on those public comments?
I can answer part of the question, and then I might put Brett on the line, our Northern Region Planning Chief, for a couple things about HSIP, but these projects are being recommended. They've been recommended by our staff and in conjunction with technical committee at some point to be included in our plan. So we're forwarding them as part of this upcoming TIP amendment, because we recommend that these projects are the most critical for safety improvements. That being said, if they're not, and there isn't consensus, if we don't want to include them in the TIP, that would be an action that we can take, and then it would get tabled for a later opportunity. We would do open houses. That wouldn't be the requirement or driven by the MPO. But Brett, can I ask, have we had open house meetings on these projects at any point? Or when would have been the last time we've had public engagement on these HSIP projects?
I'm not aware. I think these are relatively new, and we have to do the technical committee here.
Okay. Okay, so that would be something that we'll make sure we develop some dates on,
Thank you very much. That'd be
especially
great.
if there's ones that are of concern.
Yeah, I think the technical committee looking at it on January 8th, would be a good spot to start seeing which some of these might be more pressing for public input. I'm assuming there, I could probably guess which one might be in have some public input. With local comment, this being the tip for the local comment and input, from this board and local, and, if it's a highway safety project, you said there's a list of projects that might be behind these. How do we see what lists are those to help give our local input in this process to make sure the ones that we feel are most important for safety get moved forward? And how do we see that list of projects behind these 5?
On process wise, there's a nomination package that gets prepared and where the regions would take input and from project staff and our traffic safety program, and then put together a nomination package, and then that package gets scored as a state, and then those projects are moved forward until there's no funding. So that nomination package, I don't know if we typically put it on our website, but I think that certainly could be. But have you seen that, our HSIP program nominations? Do we have a location online?
Not that I'm aware of yet. We're working on a better process for next year, so that
Okay.
things are worked through the process for public involvement as they're being developed for HSIP. That hasn't been the case for this set.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So that's something we can commit as we go forward, is to work a bit more on the public engagement process during the HSIP scoring. It's a little bit less of a public evaluation board that you see with some of our programs, where we have transportation alternatives program and community transportation program, where there is a group, a panel that then scores projects, which are more qualitative and less measured, like our HSIP program. But we can certainly review what's possible and then present some options at the January meeting if that's added to the agenda.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 9C. Most important thing on the agenda is our annual dues. Jackson?
Yeah, just real quick. We all operate underneath the memorandum of understanding for operation of our office. This begins on page 127 in the packet. Actually, Corey, you got the right, nope, leave that page up there. So I just want to make note that on not January 1st, but January 2nd, I'll be sending out the 4 invoices to all of our member agencies for payment of annual dues. So I'll make sure that the board member is included on the email as well as the staff to make payment So hopefully it's all been budgeted through the council in December, so it has.
I didn't do
Okay. So watch for these invoices on January 2nd or later, and that's all that.
Any questions, anyone? And then next is item D, a conflict of interest annual statements, you see on page 135. These are, we could just, couldn't we just pass that around?
Yes. For this particular item, within our bylaws, we have, underneath Article 9, we have a conflict of interest policy for our 501c3 nonprofit. And as part of that policy, we ask that each active member of the board annually sign a statement which affirms he or she has read and understand the conflict of interest policy. So it's that simple. We did include the form on page 135. I don't need to have every signature on one piece of paper. For those folks participating online, Mayor Church, Mr. Olds, Mr. Krass, you can sign on your appropriate block, scan it and email it to me. But we'd like to keep these for the record, just simply in coordination with our bylaws.
For those who are here today, we can maybe get signatures before you come.
You want them on one or individual?
I can take 4. Or just pass it around the table. We're going to sit here.
That brings us to item 9E. Belfast Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary Review and proposed revisions to the intergovernmental operating agreement. This originally came up last summer, and I gotta say, as a policy board member, I don't remember it being on the agenda that was there. And I apologize to Ryan Anderson for missing it. And this came up last month when Jackson gave me a copy of the letter again. And I asked that this be put on the agenda for informational purposes so that we have a chance to hear from individuals who are in the middle of this thing and to try and educate ourselves about where the changes are and that they're being proposed. This is not an action item, it's for discussion only. And I don't want to get into the weeds on this totally. What I'd like to do is have Jackson start and give about 10-15 minute presentation. I'd like DOT to follow up and give you the same courtesy of 10-15 minutes. Open it up to the board for a discussion of hopefully 10 to 15 and see where we are at that point. This is not an action item. Information only and gathering at this point. So if that's acceptable for the board, we get started.
Okay, Corey, if you can go to page 166 in the packet. We have, I think, yeah, just 4 pages. I put together this table and we utilized this table at the technical committee meeting on December 4th to kind of work through the proposed edits. So to consolidate this down to just 4 pages so that we're not looking at the entire agreement. But what you're seeing in this table is, just scroll up a little bit to see the titles there. So on the left-hand column, you see what language is included in the current fast planning operating agreement on the left, and then the top right, it shows you the language that's included in the Matsu MPO agreement. And as you can see through these different sections, they are very consistent with each other through each of the sections that are being edited. And just a reminder on dates here, our operating agreement was negotiated and signed back in 2019. And the Matsu MPO agreement was signed off on in December of 2023, so about 1 year ago. Now below that, on the left-hand side, shows you the proposed edits that were provided to us by DOT. And then I just have a notes and comments column on the right so that technical committee members and board members could write their notes about what they think about these edits. So I was just going to give you a summary on each of these pages, how I interpret these edits. I'm not an attorney. I do have over 20 years of transportation planning experience, and I have been the director of the MPO for 7 years now. So this is strictly my interpretation of what I think that these edits mean and some of the hiccups I think that we may encounter with these. So I'll just have that caveat there. And I did not write any of these edits. These were all provided to us from DOT. So for this first section, kind of reading between the lines, again, my interpretation, this first section appears to be focused on taking away decision-making authority for our organization for projects in the National Highway System. Some things here with really what's happening here is that there's state statutes now being added as well as a new federal US code citation. The state statutes that are cited there, AS 19.20.200 to 220. Looking at those, reading through those Alaska statutes, section 200 is applicable to us for MPOs of 50,000 or more people. Reading the language of that statute is pretty much a copy of what's already written in the federal regulations, so I don't have any heartache with that. But citing section 210 and 220 is somewhat problematic because those two sections of the Alaska statute relate to MPOs of 200,000 or more people. So I don't feel like that those citations are appropriate to be included in our agreement since we're a small MPO, not a large MPO. And then the citation of 23 USC 103 in the middle there says it empowers states to propose modifications to the National Highway System. It feels like this was written as if DOT is interpreting that section of the US Code to be construction projects on the National Highway System. But when you go to that section of US Code, and it is in the meeting packet, it strictly relates to designating highway segments as National Highway System or not. So designating them or even removing them from that designation or that classification as National Highway System. So this seems to me to be an odd reference to put in our operating agreement. It doesn't really affect our MPO. And I can't recall when our National Highway System classifications of particular roads like Tiger Road, we want to classify this as a National Highway System. I can't recall that we've ever been involved in that decision-making process. So it just seems odd to include it there in our agreement. And then last on the bottom there, Alaska Statute 19.20.0115. Again, it appears to assert that, you know, our organization and our member governments have not requested planning authority over the National Highway System corridors. Looking at this statute, I believe it was passed in 1985, and that predates the federal legislation of 1991, where MPOs were empowered to perform that project selection process for anything funded with federal highway and federal transit funding within our boundary. Federal regulations are clear that all projects proposed for federal highway and federal transit funding within our boundary, including on the National Highway System, must be included in our local plans to be eligible for funding. So they need to be in our long range plan, which we call our MTP, and they also need to be in our short range plan, which is our TIP. So, and the board, the policy board here, gets to decide, gets to approve and adopt those plans, and they can accept or reject any projects within those plans for moving forward through our process. And that again does include those ones on the National Highway System. So, you know, really, I think there's some confusion with DOT. We're not assuming DOT's responsibilities in planning projects in the National Highway System. What this comes down to is the decision-making authority of the board to either accept or reject those projects. So we are supposed to be doing this 3C process, continuous, comprehensive, cooperative. We all work together to plan out all of these road improvements. But at the end of the day, policy board gets to decide which of those projects are advanced. But the federal funding is in our area. On the next page, Corey, moving on to other sections of the agreement. The top left there shows some specific edits. I found this one to be a little bit odd, where myself as the executive director of the organization was called out in the agreement, and it mandates me to cooperate with the state. But as the board knows, I work for this policy board, which is the board of directors. I'm not a state employee and I don't work for the state. We do cooperate with the state, but it seems odd to call out a specific staff member in this section when it's not listed in any of the three operating agreements for the three MPOs. And then below that, we have just one simple edit there for our MPO self-certification that says every 4 years, the MPO will self-certify through the state to the federal partners that we've conducted the planning process in accordance with the federal regulations. I really don't have any heartache with that edit. It's not in those same details, but that type of language was included in the Matsu MPOs, and we should be doing a joint certification for this self-certification. So we sign off as an MPO that we follow the process, the regulatory process. But DOT is the fiscal steward of the funds that we receive, and they're supposed to provide oversight to make sure that we're doing that. So I think it's appropriate that we do self-certify through the state. So I think this is a good edit, but the question is, do you open up the operating agreement to get into some of that minutia there? But that is not a problem. And then on the next page, similarly, there's a sentence being added that our long-range plan will take into consideration the state's long-range plan. This is something that we do every cycle. When we update our long-range plan, we always consider the state's long-range plan in advance forward, the statewide goals and strategies that they have included in their plan. So again, this is not that this is fine. This is okay to add into our agreement, but is it worth opening up the operating agreement and going through the process of getting this calendared on the 2 city council agendas and the borough assembly agenda for a minor non-impactful change to the agreement? Then the bottom of this page, this gets back to that the National Highway System routes, and again, the citations of 23 USC 103. And reading between the lines here, or maybe reading the lines very directly, it sounds to me like the state will give us a list of projects on the National Highway System, and we must include them in our local funding plan. But as I stated earlier, that's not quite how the process works. We participate in planning those improvements alongside DOT. DOT does do the bulk of the work to identify the transportation needs on their highway system. And, in past years, we are not necessarily given a list, but given a list of project ideas that get advanced into our local plans. But at the end of the day, the policy board still has that decision-making authority to either accept or reject any of those projects on the National Highway System. So the language there is a little bit concerning. And then the next page, at the top there's just one word that's deleted, the word full. So it looks like the state won't be providing full assistance to our MPO, but that word full is in the Matsu operating agreement. I mean, I don't mind if that word is deleted. It just seems like an odd edit to me. And then on the bottom, this is simply kind of a repeat of the theme of the edits that we saw in previous pages, where we'll take into consideration the long-range plan. We already do this. And then again, getting back to the NHS projects. But above that, my last note there, you see how FMATS is striped out and it says fast public improvement policy. The word FMAT, this is not a typo. The word FMATS was included in this agreement signed in 2019, because at that time we were transitioning from FMATS to fast planning. And for the first year of the operation of fast planning, we were using the FMATS public involvement policy, until I was able to hire Olivia Lunsford into our office, who does all of our public involvement and outreach, and for her to write our own plan for fast planning. So in 2019, it was in fact, we were using the prior organization's public involvement policy. So again, this could be updated in the document, but I think it's non-consequential. And the last time we did an update to our operating agreement, it took about a year. And there was a lot of disagreements among the attorneys at the table and the local governments, and not everybody got what they wanted, but everybody agreed to move forward. In my opinion, Mr. Clearith may share this with me, it was a bit of a painful process. And unless we have something in the operating agreement that would be impactful or beneficial to our community, I don't think accepting some of these edits is worth the heartache and level of effort that we would need to go through to get where we want to be. I'll stop there, just clear with them. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to give you my interpretation of that is.
Thank you, Jackson. I'm not gonna take questions yet, just we'll do it at the end here, so I'm turning over to DOT and whoever you want to speak, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. With me is Sean Lynch, Chief Counsel for Department of Transportation as our representative with Department of Law. First of all, appreciate all of the public comments earlier, speaking to the operating agreement. This is exactly what we were looking for over the past year or so, was a dialogue on components of the operating agreement and the accompanying boundary change. So as part of the federal planning findings that have gone on now for the past year and a half, this 3C process was highlighted as being critical to moving forward. It was a surprise to us at the technical committee, therefore, that instead of continuing the dialogue, it was decided or recommended that we indefinitely postpone any dialogue in the 3C process. What we're looking for is just to be able to have these conversations and go over these points. With these federal planning findings, what we're learning is that what has worked or what we've been doing for the last 20 years, it's not relevant and it doesn't mean it's compliant with the regulation. We've had a lot of practices that we've been doing for the past 5 or 6 steps, going back over 20 years, that are no longer allowable with current practices and current interpretation of the regulations. So we've had to learn a lot that sometimes we have to do things in a different way in order to be compliant and to move things forward. So that also, along with some of these new practices, did require that we look back at our operating agreements and other legal documents and update them appropriately to reflect current practices, not necessarily what we did 10 or 15 years ago. So we just want to talk through some of these, explain why the state, as one of the key players, as it was pointed out, feels it's necessary for this. It has not yet been forwarded to the governor, as one comment was, just for full transparency. It is still with DOT, and we're working on, with all of these documents, ensuring that they're compliant before we forward them to the governor for approval. So with that, Sean, if you would please kind of walk us through some of the additions and recommendations here in the operating agreement, that would be excellent.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And Chairman Cleawood,
you can introduce yourself.
yes, Sean Lynch, Chief Counsel for DOT.
Statewide or local?
The statewide.
Thank you.
And local. Chief Counsel, so all the other attorneys are. So if I could, just reiterating where Deputy Commissioner Keith stated that what the Deputy Commissioner asked me to address was the recommendation, that is what came to us, that the amendments, the proposed amendments, be tabled indefinitely. And so, like what DOT, what I thought, what they thought, DOT was that these amendments were with the technical committee, if there were concerns, to work through the concerns and actually be vetted, which former Mayor Ward's letter that was discussed earlier, that was his exact recommendation, that this should be vetted in the technical committee. So, in indefinitely tabling an issue where there is conflict, it is certainly not cooperation, coordination. I don't know how to get over the hurdle if the issues aren't addressed. And actually, so Mr. Hodgson, you hit the main issue. So the central issue here is the NHS planning and the selection of the projects. And so, and I think that whether the board has the decision to accept or reject any project. I think that is the issue that needs to be resolved. That is the issue that held up the approval of the last STIP and TIP. And actually, Mayor Hopkins, to address your question to the deputy commissioner earlier, you were asking is federal highways, did they approve, did we check off all 20 boxes? And a number of them, there was great progress made. But my understanding is many of these are basically in a iterative process. We will go through cycles to see if we're, and the main one here, and it's actually corrective action number 1, is DOT must develop and implement processes and procedures for cooperative comprehensive planning. It has DOT's role and responsibility for oversight, NPOs, for the procedures, air quality, conformity. That, the way I understand it, that corrective action, federal highway is very open-ended, when they will check off on that. We have STIP Amendment 2 coming at some point. We can show that the NPO and the states have worked out all the issues. And that is when I expect that's going to be checked off. Where I would like my ideal world, it's that we just have these processes, the cooperative processes working, and the federal funding is moving, projects are moving, and we just don't have, basically, conflict is not one of the C's, just the reduction, the elimination of conflict. So I don't think here, well, I guess, I don't think right now, if you don't mind, I don't know if it'll be as productive to go through each of these, the edits, but I can tell you just in general. So, Director Parks, that the intention of the citing the state laws, citing Section 103, is an expansion of NPO authority. If the NPOs want planning authority for the NHS, there's a process to do it. There's a state process, it's in state law. There's a federal process, it's in 103. You can take all, you can take, well, within the NPA, or part of it, this is if there is a way to get through this, let's get through this. But I would say on current laws and regulations, and these are the discussions we need to have, we disagree that the NPO has a veto authority over NHS projects. That those are regional projects, and regionally significant projects are required to be in the STIP, they're required to be in the TIP. And there are other laws and regulations, and that's the discussions that we really will, all of us collectively need to have. So actually, if I can address real quick, just because this has come up with a planning boundary. And so where DOT is with the planning boundary is DOT's got to make a recommendation to the governor to accept the boundary as drawn. So right now in the expansion, we pick up, the NPO picks up a portion of the Richardson Highway. That right now the planning line is correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the center line of the Richardson for a good stretch. For one, having this dispute that there is not resolution of how NHS projects are planned and selected. Until that's resolved, this issue is baked right in there. So right now, if we put the boundary instead of the center line, put it outside the right of way, that's one way to resolve it. If the best way, and this is what DOT is trying to do, is resolve it in the agreement. And that's why the two are together. If Yeah, if this NHS issue is resolved, the MPO boundary is also resolved. So where we are right now, like I said, DOT is under the corrective actions to basically, well, to have this resolved. This is our corrective action number one. Deputy Commissioner Keith said that the DOT, or I'm sorry, Federal Highways is not prescriptive. They're not gonna give us, they're not prescriptive. DOT's got to, really has to get this done. And so that's what, so the edits were proposed by DOT. My recommendation is that we keep working towards resolution. What we're looking at is resolution of all the corrective actions. I think if we resolve this NHS issue, we are, it just, so many of the barriers of conflict, just processing documents, just where we really move the ball. I think that's my entire statement, unless you had,
I think if the only thing to expand on maybe is if you could maybe speak to the regulations and how it is that we're interpreting the difference with NHS authority, because there's some, it is interesting how we have a misunderstanding on both sides, or we don't agree on the interpretation, but you could maybe speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
It would help.
And I'll just try to be relatively quick, because there are a lot of regulations, a lot of laws going on here, but to the one that I mentioned before, which is regionally significant projects, which are projects that serve transportation needs of the region, basically NHS, or in this instance, NHS. The tip shall contain them, it shall contain all regionally significant projects. I could read the citations if you want them. This is 450-326F, and then 450-2018H is the STIP shall contain them. Even the MPO planning statutes of 23 U.S.C. 134 says National Highway System projects, this is 5J5B, shall be selected for implementation from the approved tip by the state in cooperation with the Metro Planning Organization designated for the area. And so when we got deeper into these edits, that's not the portion that's up, but it actually gave a process. The state will provide the list to be incorporated in the tip. That was process. All of this is open for work. If there needs to be clarifications, we are looking to work through, but this process, until we resolve this process, we just have the statement that the board can accept or reject any project, and there's just not an agreement between the two agencies. So one of the regulations of when to open an agreement is, and here, it would take me too long to find it, but it's a significant significant change in authority of the NPO. And if that's the way that we're going to do it, or to have the, change the NHS designation for either parts in the MPA or not, if we're going to be making these modifications, this is exactly what the regulations say, open the agreement and do this, which is proper. If we're going to change the way we're doing things, we should just be clear about how it is, because right now there is a disagreement on how the NHS projects are to be. planned and selected.
So I think, thank you, Sean. And then just to close on that, also to be clear, the intention of this is not in any way to remove any authority from the MPO. What we're trying to do throughout this process is document it and define how it is that we're working together, because it has been vague. And we want to make it clear so that it's publicly accessible. We all understand what we need to do to move things forward for project delivery. And this has postponed and canceled key projects for bridge upgrades. There's challenges with safety corridor projects along the Seward Highway. So we just want to get this clear so that on our side, we're doing the right things. And it has been made clear in our conversations with Federal Highways and FTA that this 3C process is critical as we go through this and looking at projects in the years ahead, so that we're addressing any of these concerns early enough in the project. So we're not at a point where we're ready to obligate for construction and a project gets put on hold, you know, even after it's been awarded to a contract. So we're just gonna continue to improve the 3C process so that we can not end up in the situation where we've been at in the past year. And through the operating agreement, in addition to some of the other comments, that's the goal here, is being able to update the required, update the statements to be compliant, and then also document this new process for how we do work through NHS projects in a way that's clear for everyone. We don't want to have emails go back and forth that the public doesn't see. We don't want to have conversations in hallways that the public doesn't see. We want it very clear what we're doing so that everyone along the way has that opportunity to offer input, and that's what this provides. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you both. I'm gonna open up the policy for questions or comments.
So if you want to extend the meeting, we're at 2 o'clock.
Can I have a motion to extend?
So move.
Do we need a time certain or just extending?
I'm out of here at 2:15, so,
Does it really matter? Yeah.
yeah.
I got a 2:15, but I can put other people to it. Second, 2:30.
Let's. The
2:15 also
2:30.
works out if there's an amendment to my second.
Okay.
Because I can't change your motion with my second.
Make it
Second.
maybe 2:45. Sure. Okay. Concurrence is second. The motion is extend the meeting to 2:45. Do I hear a second?
Second one. Or, I don't know if I made it.
Second.
That was your original motion, right, Mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course it was.
By Mayor Beals, second by Mayor Hopkins. Let's take a vote. Board, please.
Okay, Mayor Hopkins.
Yeah.
Ms. Keith.
Yes.
Ms. Cleary.
Yes.
Mayor Bruce.
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
Mr. Krass.
Yes.
And Mr. Owens.
Yes.
Okay, we're extended to 2:45. Board members, would you have questions for either Mr. Fox or DOT?
Mayor, you're leaving. Do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Actually, what I'll be doing is, Jackson, I leave on Christmas Day. I'll be gone about 2.5 weeks. I want to sit down and go over this with you before I make any decisions.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And also same with you. Yep.
And Mayor Hopkins.
Thank you. So, in my routine joke, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just married to one. Can you, Mr. Lynch, let us know what specific citations, regulations, federal code or state statute are violated by any of these amendments and how they change it or how they address that? And this, Deputy Director Keith, Deputy Commissioner Keith, said there are violations in regs and code, and I'm wondering what specific references those are, so we can make sure that these address those specific violations.
So I guess what it's looking to address is federal planning finding. So that's, so if we were to See, I would have to make up a hypothetical. What we're trying to do, to directly answer your question, is Federal Highways has in the bringing the current step across the finish line, issued federal planning findings. Actually, both actually, I don't know about that, and so we're seeking to address those. That is it. So all of these corrective actions, and in fact, the one that I'm pointing to, the corrective action one that gets to the processes and procedures developing and implementing is 23 CFR 45208.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Oh, yes. So
23 CFR
45208, which is in general, and I'm using Federal Highway summary here, is the coordination of planning and process activities. That is what we're trying to address. So each one of these findings in the document is tied to the regulation that they're asking us to address. But this particular one with the operating agreement, we are addressing the first corrective action, the unresolved corrective action.
So you're saying it's violating 23 CFR 45208 is?
I'm saying that we are creating processes and procedures for the state and MPO, or at least this is what the state would like to do to resolve. We have a corrective action. We have to correct it for Federal Highways, for the STIP funding, for the federal aid funding. We are trying to address this NHS issue to get signed off by Federal Highways that we're in compliance.
So no, there are no violations of federal code or regs or state statute or regs in what the current agreement has. We're trying to amend this agreement that's been in place for 5 years to appeal to the changes in the STIP for this year that the Federal Highways are requesting.
So and this is where it becomes a hypothetical, we're trying to not get there. If we had an instance where this board, and I'm just going to my shortcut, it's not a quote, but this board was accepting or rejecting an NHS project in the MPA, it would be at that time that we would have the violation of, and I hear, so this is the hypothetical. I'm not saying this is happening now. This is what we're trying to avoid. But this would be the 23 USC 134 that says National Highway System projects in the National Highway System shall be selected for implementation from the approved TIP by the state. So if the MPO, we're trying to avoid this situation. This is what this exercise is about. But if the MPO was to say that project can't, we as a board won't let that project go forward, that's where we find the rub. And regulations also, but that's in the MPO authorizing statute. That's 23 USC 134. So is that?
So can I follow up to make sure I understand? So this was signed in 2019. This operation agreement. A STIP is a 4-year process. There's one every 4 years.
It covers a 4-year period.
So
it can be rolling, it can be.
I'll take that as
following.
yeah. So this is at least the second full round of STIPs that this operation agreement has been in place.
Yeah.
We did not see this same concern, item number 1, 4 years ago when this operation agreement was in place. Why is it in violation today when it was not 4 years ago?
So the Richardson Highway milepost 346, the Chena Bridge replacement project, and the Steese Highway, the Chena Hot Spring project weren't an issue. Well, I'm telling you that we all experienced the tumbling across the finish line at the last step. That's what we're trying to avoid. Those two projects were, for that, was a large part of that tumbling. So that's what we're trying to, and that's what I'm saying, that's not cured. We don't want to get to the next step and be geared for a tumble. We're trying to sort that out, however that is, but to accept we're gonna be in the tumble or to not address it, I think is we're trying to address it.
A follow-up to that would be in the previous steps, these were programmed in our step. All of these NHS projects were in our step for funding. They were also simultaneously listed on the tip. What changed a year ago was the requirement to remove them completely from the step and put them on the tip. And if they're not included in the tip, we are unable to obligate a project moving forward. So if it's like in Safer Seward Highway project from mile 488 to what was 118, that's a last safety corridor. That's a state project that we've been pushing for to remove the safety corridor designation. If there's concerns with that portion of that was within the tip, then that project could not be moving forward as one section that was required to be removed from our STIP. So that now, at this point, the project is shortened. So there'll be a section that is still bottlenecked as folks go south, unless we can figure out a way to resolve that. But prior to this point, that project has been on our STIP going back 15, 20 years. This was a year ago that it had to be removed. So that is why you're seeing this change in how we approach this so that we can mitigate any conflict through the pre-seed process prior to projects getting stopped. Some of the times what we had seen in the back and forth dialogue is it was a technicality. Safer Seward Highway had a different name in the MTP, even though it was included in the MTP. Therefore, it couldn't be programmed in the TIP. Therefore, the project was stopped. So there's just several reasons why we want to not have things out of alignment, but also so that DOT, which has the liability and the oversight for the condition of the NHS routes. If there's a route that we're unable to address, we're still liable for that, regardless of the planning authority. So our oversight and stewardship of the NHS routes that everyone travels on throughout the state, we still have that liability whether or not we're able to spend funds on it. So we're ensuring through this process that we are able to take care of the NHS routes, which are our oversight, unless, as Sean mentioned, the municipality would like to assume that, which was a request that could be made from the city of Fairbanks for the city of North Pole. And then at that point, through that process, the NHS routes could then be, that oversight role would transfer, or would we still maintain over
It's a
oversight?
negotiated agreement, so
Okay.
that's why I said all or so. That would be negotiated.
That answers.
Thanks. I appreciate the importance of the Seward Highway and the safety dangers there, as well as all the safety and high rates of traffic fatalities we were looking at earlier in this meeting, not being in Fairbanks and the importance for that down there. These amendments have not gone forward to AMAT yet, so I'm more worried about the impacts of FMATs in here in Fairbanks. And so that's good to know that how it plays in down there. But I guess I'm still wondering why the entire operating agreement and our local inputs this needs to be open for a process that has been working for the last 5 years. And only a few new projects are being addressed before my time. So I guess I'm still not entirely clear, but I think since we have just a limited time here, I want to open up the questions, make sure I don't monopolize all the time for other people online as well.
Thank you. Corey, is there anybody else online that has their hand up?
No, at this time.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Scott Krass, raised his hand.
Mr. Kraft, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I had a couple of questions. My first question was for Jackson and possibly NW if she's still there. I was just wondering, it's going a ways back, but the differences between the
Scott, I'm gonna interrupt you here. We can, you're currently garbled. Can you get closer or do something there?
Sure.
Type the question in the chat if we can't hear you.
Yeah, I'll do that.
While he's doing that, just a question for you. It seems like the crux of this is the relationship to the board with these NHS projects. And is there a legal, I mean, do you take the position that the board does not have the right to either accept or reject it in its total, or what?
I could if you'd like. So the MPO has a cooperation coordination, all cooperation and coordination and joint planning is baked into all of it, whether it's NHS or the MPO's projects, you know, the metropolitan projects. There are many of decisions in that process. I guess where I would draw the line would be there is not, or if there is an NPO veto power for NHS projects in the statutes and regulations, I see a lot that say there's not, or that says the state shall, so it is a state decision. So the state's vetting of a project through its STIP process and its project evaluation board, you know, the state's developing its list of NHS projects. I don't see an NPO veto power, if that's answers your question.
You know, it'd be nice if you could maybe formalize that in a letter or something like that. To me, that's the crux of it. Is he right? Is he wrong? And then if we say we don't think that's the case, and I guess we can get a legal opinion on this side too. There is no side here. We're all supposed to work together. So yeah, I would appreciate that. If you could do that. I think that would, like Mayor Cruz is asking, to get more information, it would help him as well. We have Scott's.
Yes, yeah, there are two, and I'll read them out. The first one is potentially for Jackson. It says, what are the differences between FMATs and fast involvement policy? Scott, are you referring to the public involvement policy?
Yes.
So we did they are very similar. We did a comprehensive update to our public participation plan, and we also wrote a Title VI plan. So, and the major updates in there included a lot of new maps for some of our transportation disadvantaged communities, you know, looking at where we have low income folks, where we have folks that live with low percentage of car ownership, you know, race, et cetera. So, but anyways, that they're similar, but when Olivia Lunsford was hired, we took our public participation plan to a whole different level. And also this was, we did another update during COVID where we never had virtual participation in our meetings before. So it's, you know, it's how do we advertise our meetings? How do we carry them out? What are the different ways the public can attend? So anyways, it was just a big improvement from FMATs up to FAST.
And then the second question is for Catherine. It says, this is the first time I've heard that the governor's office has not received our updated boundary map. Why are we just now hearing about this?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. We're not sure. There seems to be the common belief that it is waiting for governor's approval. So at every opportunity, we've been trying to clear that up, that this is still within Department of Transportation, not at the governor's office. So when we have documents that we feel reflect our current practices and current does address the corrective actions, and those will be forwarded. So, yeah, I apologize if that hasn't been, made clear, and, yeah, we'll just continue to provide, those updates.
Misty, sorry, that last thing you said. Until this operation agreement reflects the updates and the changes, then the boundary will not be approved? Is that what you said?
Both the boundary, update and, correlating operating agreement update or intergovernmental agreement update, which would include the changes to the boundary as a part of that. Those will get forwarded to the governor's office, together for, combined approval.
So are you saying the operation agreement and the boundary change are related and tied together?
Yes.
Can you reference that citation for us or how that is related?
Yeah, the primary change, and this is where when our chief counsel is here, to speak to regulations, not being a lawyer, I try to hand that off to him. The primary change, though, as he mentioned, was changes in authority within the MPO do require an accompanying MPO or operating agreement upgrade. Because of that and some of the larger conversations that we're having, submitting them together is the way for approval. You want anything to add on that?
No, only that if your question was about well, I can get the citation that in fact, I'll provide that. But the boundary map has so right now, this is at DOT. DOT has to recommend an approval to the governor, whatever that is. Right now, we've got a draft adjustment, this is ready for recommendation. But we do have, was the issue that I said, that right now the addition has got the Richardson Highway, as the map described it is, I believe it's the center line of the Richardson. So does DOT can't make that recommendation. I don't know how DOT makes that recommendation for approval with the inclusion of half of Richardson Highway in the agreement when the NHS, Richardson Highway, obviously it's NHS, but the NHS issues unresolved. So if it were to be unresolved, if the final resolution was the MPO, I don't really know how DOT satisfies its planning finding, but let's just say the MPO says we're not gonna change anything. I think DOT's recommendation to the governor would have to be, we need an adjustment to the map to move the line to the outside of the right of way of the Richardson. So it's exactly there where they tied together. It's an NHS issue in both, and they're linked. I hope that is clear.
It's a silty puddle, not quite mud. So you're saying they are linked, there's no statutory reference that says they're linked.
So
There is?
Yes.
Okay, then why don't you just provide us that citation for the next meeting on how that works?
Or I'll just read it out right now.
Do you have the number for that?
So 23 CFR 450 310J.
Okay,
so
has the DOT or the governor requested any changes to the boundary since it's been sent, and when did we send that boundary?
December 23.
Okay. Of 2023, correct? Not, a year ago. So have you guys requested any boundary changes? Because we got these operation amendments in the summer based on the most recent of the first agenda. Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Anderson, the department has been requesting the opportunity to present to the technical committee and to the policy board meeting our concerns about the boundary and where there's not alignment with the operating agreement. That's been our request, which was in writing to Mayor Ward over 6 months ago. We're concerned because we need to have a boundary update approved by the governor the end of 2026. So if there is something that's gonna take some time, we just wanna start working on it so that we can get to an agreement ahead of that, so that funds going into Fairbanks aren't at risk. So we're trying to have these conversations, which is all we're asking for right now, is if we can continue this conversation both with the policy board and the technical committee, so we can get to a common understanding of what should be in our agreements, what should be in the boundary, and ensure that our program isn't going to be slowed down because of these outstanding issues. So, yeah, we hope to have that opportunity, because without having opportunity to dialogue and work through these things, I'm not sure that that follows the lines of BC process, but that's hopefully that answers your question.
We'll review the citation and see if it does.
Yeah.
Any other people online? No. Any other? Any other questions, Mayor? At this time?
The back up. Stating, was it on page, it would be 150 of the packet, page 11 of the operational agreement. For NHS routes, the state will cooperate with the MPO in developing plan modifications for the National Highway Safety Routes located in the MPA as prescribed in this US code. The state will provide a list of NHS projects located in the MPA to the MPO for incorporation into the TIP. That will then be incorporated by reference into the STIP in accordance with 23 CFR 450-222B. I'm not intimately familiar with CFR 450-222B. That incorporation of the state's list of NHS projects into the TIP for reference into the STIP. Where is the local input in that process that you see it handled?
What's one way I could comment on this, and Jackson pointed to this a little bit about kind of a proposed process for moving forward with these projects. When projects are fully in the STIP, we're used to a very thorough public involvement process for projects that are on the STIP. I don't see how that would change in any way when we have projects that are NHS projects that are included in the TIP. All of our projects go through extensive public involvement as part of the planning, as part of the environmental. As we go throughout construction, there's public engagement. So we have that opportunity at many stages before a project evolves to a point of construction. So those things would stay the same. What we'd like to, one point to think about is in AMATS, and I know that AMATS isn't necessarily of greatest concern, but was a project in the AMATS area that the community just did not support. There's a lot of challenges with the design around an overpass and where we had pedestrian crossings. People were not comfortable with the project as it was designed. That's a good example of like that. We coordinated on that. We pulled it out. At that point, it was programmed in our STIP. We pulled it, and it's still going through discussions as to what we're going to do with that project and perhaps a redesign. I think that's a successful example of how it's supposed to work. And this, what we're talking about at this point, is having a list of projects and providing them early to the technical committee, which would then make it public as those documents are available to the public. And in these, you would see the projects that are under consideration or that the department finds a priority due to pavement condition or bridge condition, safety measures. So those projects would be provided, and then that offers those opportunities for public involvement. And when the technical committee or policy board sees concerns, that's when we work through it in the early stages of a project. And as we go through that, ideally we resolve those concerns and a project moves forward to construction. And if we don't resolve those concerns as we go throughout the pre-construction process, that's when we have to make the decisions of, is it in the best interest to move forward with these projects? Or do we have to do, go another route? That's what Federal Highways and FTA is requesting that we do, is just ensure that we have this thorough engagement on the projects to factor in any concerns as we go. Which is what we've done in the Anchorage area projects. And I think we're still catching up to some of the changes in placing it on the tip again versus the STIP. And I'm confident we can do a better job as we go of ensuring we have this early engagement as it goes through the MPO process as well. It's a double opportunity almost to have public comment, which will be positive. Yeah.
So follow up on that,
Got somebody online too.
Okay.
Who wants to- I'm gonna have to wrap this up.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, wait till the next shot. Who's online?
There's a question from Scott Kraft. It's to Captain Keith. It says, does DOT have the authority to delay this boundary update indefinitely?
No, absolutely not. It is in no one's best interest to delay the boundary update indefinitely. We're unclear exactly of what the process would be if we don't have a boundary update by 2026, but we would likely not want to find out. We want to ensure that the funding to the sub allocations within the MPA here can move forward. So I also think we're confident that if we can continue conversation on this, we can get to a point where clarifying any minor changes to the boundary and working through some of the edits in this agreement that we can get there, but as long as we can keep a conversation going. So no, we don't want to have a boundary not approved by the governor by then.
There is one follow-up by Scott. It says, so the commissioner does have the authority to delay it for how long in your view?
The boundary update needs to be approved by the governor, December 2026. No later than that.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up here. If you could, the request I had and that veto flower and I'd like to just see that. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the next agenda for further discussion. Have a little more time on that. As it stands right now, there is no action item. And need to make that clear. We're not changing the agreement. It's not in the works right now. What we are doing is discussing it, and I think it's very important. We have 4 policy board members here, and it's always better if we get along and try to work these things out. Maybe short of changing this agreement, which is a pain. Jackson is right on that. It took us a year to get 4 legal entities to agree on something, and that's a miracle, my friends. At that time, it was the borough that was holding us on, ironically, so. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and thank you all. Thank you, folks, for your research on that. We're gonna go to item 10, obligations.
Or this is on page 1. Page 178. So just real quick, as I stated last month, the obligation report has been updated to federal fiscal year 2025. And as of November 25th, this report is old. There have been 2 obligations. One was for the design phase of the fast improvement program, and one was for design phase of the Northern Region Signal Interconnect. We have no new offsets. And just a note that Low Road resurfacing, that project completion letter has been sent out to the contractor. So that project will be closed in June. And that's my report.
Any questions? Thank you. Any other issues? Board members or staff?
One comment, sure.
Yes, please. Well, we'll start the comments right here.
Okay.
Item number 12.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
No, go for it.
Just the conversation today was super helpful. Thanks for engaging in that. And these disagreements are very healthy. They're also not unique to our state and these MPOs. So that is the benefit of the peer exchange that's happening January, is it 20th, Jackson? The peer
28th to 30th.
28th to 30th, and that is open to policy board members. So, please, if you're able to attend, come to that because these topics will be on that agenda and getting a chance to work through this with other states and how they're addressing it and share some ideas there. And I think that'd be another good opportunity to work through some of these topics. So if you're able to attend, please do so.
Thank
you.
Malcolm, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
No. Mayor Church, are you still online?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any closing comments for us?
No, sir. Thank you.
You were at the concert last night, right?
Yes, I was. That was pretty wonderful out at North Pole that they were all of the alumni was able to get on stage from Bruce Hanson, director Bruce Hanson. It was pretty special.
You're very fortunate to have Jenna Trade-Awful out there.
Thank you. Pretty wonderful.
Mr. Kraft?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Well, I thank you folks for the time today. It's a good discussion. It's going to keep going, I am sure. And thank you to the staff for working on the list of acronyms. I think that's going to be very helpful to everybody, not just the policy board members that come and go, but to the community as a whole. Maybe with the deregulation they're talking about, someday we won't have all these acronyms. What do you think? The calendar on the bottom. Last year you had those cute little cards made up.
We're making them.
Yeah, I would really appreciate that.
It's in the works. Olivia's working on them.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Mayor Hopkins?
Second.
Second, Catherine. Is there any objection to that? We will take a roll. We are adjourned.
2:40 p.m. Yep. So sign that minutes for me.
Yes.
531.
Yeah, oh no, she's,
Oh, that's sad.
Is that better?
yeah, that was the,